नाज़रीन, बलूचिस्तान फिर दोबारा स्पॉटलाइट में है। अभी जो ये जाफ़र एक्सप्रेस के बाद जो एक क्रैकडाउन हुआ है स्पेशली BYC के ख़िलाफ़, उसमें हम लोगों ने वाइड स्प्रेड अरेस्ट्स, वाइड स्प्रेड बैटन चार्ज भी देखे और फिर उसके रिस्पांस में बलूचिस्तान नेशनल पार्टी मंगल वो निकली है एहतजाज के लिए और अभी भी वो करंटली मस्तूंग में स्टक हैं क्योंकि अभी रिसेंटली ही एक अटेम्प्टेड बॉम्ब अटैक था उनके ऊपर जो फॉर्चुनेटली अनसक्सेसफुल रहा एंड सो फार वो ये कह रहे हैं जो रैली निकली हुई है दैट ट्रेंचेस हैव बीन डग, वहाँ पर ब्लॉकेड्स लगाए हुए हैं कि ताकि उनकी जो ये क्वेटा की तरफ जो ये रवाना एक जा रहा है रैली वो ना पहुँच पाए। ये एक पीसफुल मूवमेंट है और साथ साथ में स्टेट ने ऑलरेडी बता दिया है नो अनसर्टेन टर्म्स दैट देयर इज़ नो डिफरेंस बिटवीन द BYC एंड टेररिस्ट एंड BYC के साथ उनके जितने भी सिंपैथेटिक्स हैं, उनके जितने भी एलाइज हैं वो भी इंक्लूडेड हैं, ऑल पार्ट एंड पार्सल ऑफ द सेम बास्केट। नाज़रीन, इससे भी पहले हमने अब्दुल मालिक बलोच का भी इंटरव्यू किया और बिल्कुल ही पिछले एपिसोड में हमने सनाउल्लाह बलोच साहब का इंटरव्यू किया और दोनों की यही राय थी कि पार्लियामेंट्री सोल्यूशन, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डायलॉग, दीज आर द वे फॉरवर्ड। बट आज हमारे साथ एक बहुत स्पेशल गेस्ट हैं, वो है मिस्टर राशिद रहमान साहब और द रीज़न वाई वी हैव इनवाइटेड हिम हियर इज़ बिकॉज ये बलूचिस्तान में 70s में ही वाज ऑन द सीन, ऑन द ग्राउंड जब ये जो सारा सिचुएशन था वो अनफोल्ड हो रहा था, एक रेजिस्टेंस मूवमेंट थी वो बहुत एक्टिव थी एंड वी वांटेड हिज पर्सपेक्टिव स्पेसिफिकली क्योंकि वी हैव सीन कि यहाँ पर बलूचिस्तान का जो क्वेश्चन है वो बहुत ही ज़्यादा कॉम्प्लिकेट हो चुका है एंड राइट नाउ वी आर होपिंग कि फ्रॉम हिज एक्सपीरियंसेस इन द 70s वो हम लोग को बता सकें कि सो फार जो थिंग्स डेवलप हो चुकी हैं एंड how things have reached so far, how they have come to in 2025. Is there a way forward? Is there a solution? Or are we looking at something completely complicated and different entirely? So thank you so much Mr. Rashed Rahman साहब। Since आपके obviously एक history भी थी 70s में, आप वहाँ पर जो resistance movement थे, you were directly a part of it in Balochistan. So we wanted to know from the 70s to 2025, did you notice कि situation has developed, has it become complicated, do you think history is just repeating itself, this is something periodic?
Balochistan situation has been complicated from day one. And the reason is, if you'll forgive slight deviation into history, Balochistan had a special status even under the British. It was a treaty state. And when independence was looming, the Khan of Kalat argued that our status is different from the rest of India and we should be treated differently, we should be negotiated with, either we will become independent or we will see what should be our best option. But in March 48, the accession was, it is claimed by the Khan himself, was extracted by force, against the wishes of the both houses of Balochistan, the Sardar's upper house as well as the citizenry's lower house. So there have been rebellions ever since, from time to time. 48 there was a rebellion, his own brother Agha Abdul Karim. Martial law, they attacked Kalat, arrested the Khan and brought him and kept him under house arrest in a house round the corner from here, P block. As children we used to cycle past it, see a flag up there, a policeman, and we used to wonder what this is, but we would always be shooed away. And then later we learned what it was about. So there was another rebellion which ended in an unfortunate series of events in about 2 years, when, just like in 48, the rebels were called down on oath on the Quran that nothing would happen to them. And then Nawroz Khan, this elderly tribal leader who led the revolt, his 8 or 9 sons and nephews were hanged. He was spared because he was very old and died in prison. Then the Murrays revolted, Sher Muhammad Murray, General Sharoff in the 60s. That ended when Ayub was overthrown and Yahya compromised. because he had his hands full with a lot of problems. And then the 70s struggle. I don't think anyone wanted the struggle to take place when it did. It was forced on us. And it was forced on us because Sardar Ataullah Mengal had been made Chief Minister, Bizenjo Saab was governor, and the 10 months that his ministry lasted, there were constant provocations and attempts to destabilize Balochistan, to have some excuse. And the excuse finally was that arms were discovered in the Iraqi embassy in Islamabad. And the charge was this is meant for the Baloch guerrillas. And so the government was dismissed, and gradually the rebellion acquired momentum, acquired spread. Nevertheless, it did not end in a complete victory for the state, although they managed to chase away a lot of the groups who took refuge in Afghanistan. But our group in particular, we fought them to a standstill. 4 divisions, not a joke. And then, of course, Ziaul Haq, who had overthrown Bhutto and had his hands full then with the PPP, compromised with the Baloch movement. And then, as sometimes happens, even if there are differences, the pressure of the struggle, keeps a lid on them. But once that pressure is off, the lid came off, and it disintegrated politically. And in that disintegration, Mr. Bizenjo intervened with his long-held view that armed struggle will get us nowhere, and we should depend on parliamentary politics. From 1977 to 2002, 25 years, the Baloch tried that. Sardar Ataullah's son, Akhtar Jan Mengal, who now heads the Balochistan National Party Bengal, was made Chief Minister, but also lasted, like his father, 10 months. And that was removed. So at the end of 25 years, there was a climate of opinion in Balochistan which said, look, this hasn't, we haven't achieved anything with this. The state has not addressed any of our long-standing grievances, whether it is mineral rights, gas is a very good example. It was discovered in Sui in 1952. And not till 1985 did Quetta have gas. And the rest of Balochistan still doesn't, by the way. And then there are other examples, copper, Sandak, and now Rekudik. They say there is oil, gas, other minerals. It's rich, but undeveloped. And whatever development has taken place, the critique is that it has not trickled down to the people. It has not helped the people in any way, and that includes CPEC, which is why the Chinese are under attack there. They are seen as people who are coming in to help develop the resources of Balochistan. It can be the water port or it can be minerals, but we are not going to get anything out of it.
Financial colonizers.
So there is resentment, long-standing resentment, boiling over now. So in 2002, the Balochistan Liberation Army, which was at that time led by Nawab Khair Bakhsh Mari's son, Baloch, decided once again to start the armed struggle. Baloch was killed in Afghanistan by a drone strike in 2007, and the received wisdom is that his brother Herbiar is now the leader, but Herbiar denies it. I suppose he's sitting in London in exile and has to be careful, But by and large, people believe it. Now, Baloch's death in 2007 was 1 year after Nawab Akbar Bugti was killed. and half the Bugti tribe, which has never before revolted, is in revolt. Ramda, his grandson, was also in exile. Argument of Mr. Bizenjo post the 70s struggle that this will not achieve anything and it is parliamentary struggle that we must rely on, I think that argument is weaker today than ever. Akhtar Mengal has resigned from the National Assembly because he says, Sunai nahi, sunta hi koi nahi. Malik Baloch, for all his good intentions and efforts, unable to, the moderate nationalist political forces have been sidelined. I'm sorry to say the 2024 elections, there's been a lot of skullduggery, but anyway, that's another issue. So they've been sidelined. A movement in Balochistan for many years now asking for news of the disappeared has in its development produced nothing less than a social revolution. Balochistan is to a considerable extent still a tribal society. The status of women and how they are treated and how they behave is a very, old thing. But in that very society, between the 70s and now, a middle class has emerged which is educated and includes women who are educated. So when Dr. Mahrang Baloch, who by the way is a doctor, comes out to lead the Baloch Yakjehti committee to ask either their disappeared be presented before a court of law if they've done something wrong or freed, it has resonance, and it is nothing less than a social revolution in that society. Those thousands of young women who are out facing the might of the state, and it is an unnecessary harsh treatment that they are receiving. What are they asking for? Justice. I want to remind you, Argentina in Latin America in the 60s had a very terrible military dictatorship or series of dictatorships, and they too disappeared people. And there arose a group there which used to demonstrate every week in the Plaza de Mayo, and they were called Mothers of Plaza de Mayo, and they were asking for the return of their children. This is a natural human response to a loved one disappearing and no news being available as to whether they are dead, whether they are alive, whether they are okay, what state they are in. It's torture for the families and for the loved ones. And so I think a perfectly reasonable demand, which carries so much resonance and momentum, as we can see in Balochistan, is being treated harshly, unnecessarily, and in my view foolishly.
आपका कहने का मतलब यही है कि वो एक मिलिट्री स्ट्रगल से पार्लियामेंट्री स्ट्रगल पे आए और अब फिर एक मिलिट्री स्ट्रगल पे आए, और लेकिन ये जो महरंग बलोच का आप जिक्र कर रहे हैं कि ये एक सोशल चेंज है, वो किस डायरेक्शन का चेंज है? वो क्या जो हम देखते आए हैं तारीख़ के अंदर के पीसफुल स्ट्रगल है, जैसे इंडियन इंडिपेंडेंस का स्ट्रगल है, तो ये क्या महरंग का जो स्ट्रगल है हम उसे इस तरह कहेंगे कि पीसफुल प्रोटेस्ट का जो सिंग है कि भाई अपनी मांग तक हासिल करने के लिए वो करते रहें और इसमें कोई वायलेंस ना करे, नॉन वायलेंट सर, क्या उस तरह का स्ट्रगल है ये?
देखिए, Mahrang achieved the leadership of this movement later. Initially, the people who started this, वो क्वेटा प्रेस क्लब के सामने सिट इन करते थे और डिमांड करते थे, और मर्द थे। लेकिन आहिस्ता आहिस्ता बाप गायब हो गया, भाई गायब हो गया, हस्बैंड गायब हो गया, बेटा गायब हो गया, तो जैसे मैंने अर्जेंटीना का एग्जांपल दिया, माएँ फिर निकली, माएँ निकली, बेटियां निकली, बहनें निकली, यही कहने कि भाई खुदा का खौफ करो, हमें कम से कम इतला तो कोई दे दो. इट्स अ टॉर्चर नॉट नोइंग व्हाट हैपेंड टू आवर लव्ड वंस. अब वो जो एटीट्यूड है हार्श किस्म का, उनको डंप कर दिया है इंसर्जेंसी की बास्केट में, हालांकि ऐसी कोई बात नहीं है. दे आर नॉट इंसर्जेंट्स, they are a peaceful struggle asking for their rights as citizens, for human rights.
बट सर हमने ये भी नोटिस किया है कि यस इट फॉर एटलीस्ट इन द मॉडर्न एरा ऑफ द बलोच रेजिस्टेंस मूवमेंट ख़वातीन या वुमेन दे आर ऑन द फोर फ्रंट ऑफ दैट पीसफुल जो ये प्रोटेस्ट है उसके थ्रू. सिविलियंस कमिंग आउट, पार्लियामेंट्री प्रोसेस भी नहीं कहेंगे, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोसेस भी नहीं कहेंगे, ना militant process, but militant side पे भी we are seeing this sort of like confusing progressivism जिसके अंदर female suicide bombers भी आ रही हैं. And it's not just हम लोग ये कहेंगे कि women who have been maybe indoctrinated, these are women who were educated. जैसे शरी बलोच है, she had a master's, so women उस साइड पे भी on the forefront, but obviously completely एक violence है against the state, वो route भी इख्तियार कर रही हैं. So what is exactly happening that women सारी lead ले रही हैं on either end of the spectrum when it comes to the Baloch resistance movement?
This is also a difference between the 70s struggle and today. And I told you in between what has happened is that an educated middle class has emerged, men and women both. And one of their suicide bombers was an educated woman. Suicide bombing is new. It's something they have picked up from the terrorists, ironically. Balochistan has never known this before in any struggle. It's a sign on the one hand of the desperation, and on the other hand it is a sign of a newfound higher commitment in which people are prepared to sacrifice their lives for a cause they believe in, whether we believe in it or not, whether we agree with it or not, stating an objective fact.
Yes.
Shari Baloch killed herself, suicide bombing, Karachi University. So the thing is that Balochistan, that society is changing as we speak, has changed considerably from the 70s. The groups in the field, the insurgent groups in the field, are no longer entirely dependent on the old tribal Sardari system. Many of them are middle class. Allah Bakhsh is middle class, and the spread indicates that the ranks of the insurgents today are chock-a-block with educated young people, including women. And that too is nothing less than a social revolution in Balochistan's tribal society. This is what I was trying to say vis-a-vis, the disappeared issue. Why it has assumed such dimensions, I am saying, is because this is a continuing process that is accelerating. So along with it, parallel with it, is the acceleration of the movement demanding answers.
तो सर आपके ख्याल से ये 50 साल से तो अब ये एक्टिवली इसको सारा कुछ देखा है, उससे 30 साल पीछे मतलब 78 ईयर्स हो गए हैं ये, तो आपके ख्याल से क्या है कि ये स्टेट जो है वो क्यों नहीं लिसन कर रहा अगर कोई नाराज़ लोग हैं बलूचिस्तान के अंदर?
I think this is one of the great disappointments that Voicepkdotnet Bizenjo took with him to his grave. That he was not able to achieve anything tangible from the course that he had advocated and fought for all his life and even after the 70s struggle. Sardar Ataullah Mengal, for a time after he came out from Hyderabad, the case, tried not only to advocate a reasonable, just solution to Balochistan's issues, he even set up a platform of the Pakhtuns, Baloch, Sindhis, Poonam it was called or something. Then eventually got so frustrated, went into exile. I'm saying there's a history of moderate nationalist voices, nationalist because anyone with a, half an iota of political consciousness in Balochistan inevitably gravitates towards nationalism, if he's not a sellout. There are plenty of sellouts too, by the way. Moderate nationalists have not been engaged with, have not been given room, have not been treated with, I think, fairness and with any seriousness. At the best of times, they may have been given a sop or two and then manipulated and made helpless. So the frustrations that build up as a result, one generation passes, two pass, the third generation says enough. This farce has to end if we are to get any of our rights, and at that point it was not yet independence, 2002. Then it's a life and death situation, and we are dying slowly. Better to die in a different way and try and achieve something. So young people took to the mountains once again. The movement has spread. It has educated people in its ranks, women as well, and it spread. They're talking of 8 districts, but I think it's in all of Balochistan. And they are showing now an enhanced capability that nobody could have dreamt of, including the security forces. Jafar Express was attacked once before, but nothing like this. Remote attack. This time they not only attacked it, they took it over, and they took hostages, and they killed some of those hostages. No doubt about it. But the fact that you can mount such a large operation, and I don't believe 33 of them were just sitting around with the hostages waiting for the security forces to arrive and kill them. I don't believe that story. No guerrillas will be sitting around waiting when a danger is imminent. They would have disappeared. So there's a whole controversy about who those 33 were, and the attempt to identify the bodies by the Baloch JT led to a fracas, and they stormed the hospital and took 3 bodies, and then they were snatched back, and all hell broke loose. You have to understand why these things happen. A person who has been agitating for news of a loved one for years, done long marches, done hunger strikes, done sit-ins, done press conferences, done rallies, done the works. Sooner or later they're going to get very angry, surely. And that's what is in evidence, this anger. You're not dealing with it intelligently. It is patently illegal, unconstitutional to make people disappear. But it is a practice that the security forces, agencies are able to get away with because they have impunity. They set up this farce of a committee on the disappeared, Justice Javed Iqbal. What came of it? No resolution. It was a farce. And this playing around with figures, which reminds me of what has happened vis-a-vis Bangladesh, this whole argument, nahi 3 lakh nahi mare, 30,000 mare, nahi 30 lakh. Bhai, as far as I am concerned, even if you killed one, it's wrong. Forget the numbers are not the issue. It's what you were doing there. And similarly here, all this halabaloo, कि इतने cases हैं, इतने नहीं हैं, all that.
एक साइजेबल पोर्शन बलूचिस्तान में रहने वालों पश्तून भी हैं, तो उनकी भी यही मांग है जो बलोचों की है या नहीं? वो कुछ फ़र्क समझते हैं, या वो ज़्यादा सेटल्ड एरिया में हैं तो शायद उनका कुछ तासुर अलहदा है?
Some demands are common. देखिए ना, सबकी डिमांड बलूचिस्तान में ये है कि हमारा पुरसाने हाल होना चाहिए। कोई हमें पूछे तो सही, हमारा क्या हाल है देखे तो सही, हमारे लिए कुछ करे तो सही, 76 साल हो गए हैं, ज़्यादा हो गए हैं, 78 साल हो गए हैं, तो it is desperately poor even today. The vast majority of people, Baloch or Pashtun or anybody else,
living in Balochistan.
they are starving यार. They are so poor you can't imagine. आप चले मेरे साथ, बच्चों के पास कपड़े नहीं, फटे कपड़े हैं, चप्पल नहीं है. You go and see the conditions for yourself. आपका दिल दहल जाएगा. I promise you. And this is not new. This has been going on, as I said, since the beginning. And I think it is time the state really began to examine whether all that it has been doing in the approach it has adopted since independence, whether that is doing Balochistan any good and whether it's doing Pakistan any good. I think it's time for a fresh look. But unfortunately, the military establishment and the security establishment, and we are called a national security state after all, they are not willing to listen. There's a mindset, and I think a lot of it stems from 1971, the defeat by India, POWs and all that happened, humiliation, you know. I think the mindset that emerged out of that was never again. But never again, okay, this is not East Pakistan, situation is different, but you can reproduce a similar result even if you don't intend to. And that is my worry. Are we heading in such a direction?
When we say that there एक Balochistan question है, then the implication is कि फिर कोई एक answer exist करता है. आपने अभी बताया कि जैसे द लेट मिस्टर बिजेंजो, उनके माइंड में ये था कि पार्लियामेंट्री प्रोसेस इज़ द सोल्यूशन, एंड नाउ थिंग्स हैव जिस तरीके से प्रोग्रेस किया है दैट डजंट अपीयर टू बी द केस एनी मोर. देन यू हैव बलोच मिलिटेंट्स जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को एक्सेप्ट नहीं करते, स्टेट को इन्वेडर मानते हैं. देन यू हैव द स्टेट जो कहता है शूट ऑन साइट, वी डोंट वांट देम हियर, एब्सोल्यूट इरेडिकेशन, वी वांट दैट. व्हेन यू हैव सच टू angry, opposed, hostile parties.
Diametrically.
Completely. And then you also have in the middle, then there's the BYC. Dr. Mahrang Baloch, currently हम लोग ये कह सकते हैं कि she is the poster child, the voice of BYC right now. Even she has on multiple occasions, Samideen has come out and said that we are not here to negotiate with the state, we just want our rights. So even they are not willing to sit down, and वही जो compromise का एक सिलसिला जो आप पता है historically आता रहता था, वो भी
What do you suggest they should compromise on?
That's the question. आप जब आंसर अब मिस्टर जो लेट बिजेंजो का है वो अब एग्जिस्ट या फिर उसका फेथ उसमें रहा नहीं, तो where is the solution if at all?
I use Bizenjo's name,
yes.
But even Sardar Ataullah Mengal tried for years.
Yes.
Khairbakhsh was always the most radical of them, and I think he had given up on parliamentary politics after the 70s struggle. At least he is not on record as having said anything to that effect. In fact, he always spoke very little, as we know. The moderate, open political parliamentary road wasn't just Bizenjo, there were many others. That came a cropper after 25 years of trying post the 70s struggle. This is what I'm saying. And when you don't leave room for a solution along a peaceful path, sooner or later people are going to adopt a more radical path. So I'm trying to say the cause of the resurrection, in a sense, of the nationalist insurgency is the conclusion they've come to that there's no alternative. So when you are in that kind of frame of mind and the state continues with its hardline stance, then where is the room for compromise? Compromise happens normally in such situations when both parties come to the conclusion that no, we can't win this in this manner. So we have to try something else. Both parties have to come to that conclusion. And it's not necessary that the compromise emerges. Talks can take place. A dialogue can take place, and yet a solution may not come. Solution eventually still comes from military means. Vietnam is a very good example of that. But the effort, the desire to find a way, find a path which doesn't involve so much human suffering and sacrifice, it has been considered worth a try by many of their leading political figures like Bizenjo and Sardar Ataullah Mengo, and before the 70s struggle, even Khair Bakhsh. They were in parliament, you know. But sad to say, I repeat, I think younger generation in particular, but political opinion generally, has come to the conclusion that the state is not willing to give the space required for moderate nationalist politics, parliamentary politics to flourish. And therefore, QED, what's going to follow is militancy, armed struggle, insurgency. This is what's happening.
आपके सजेशन में आप स्टेट को क्या सजेस्ट करेंगे, मतलब कि व्हाट अगर वो क्या करे?
मैंने स्टेट को कई दफ़ा सजेस्ट किया है. When I was editor Daily Times, Dr. Asim Bajwa was DG ISPR. He would visit me very frequently to try and get me to change my policies. I explained to him. I said, sir, okay, even if they are demanding independence, I'm not saying you have to agree to that. But within the four corners of the Constitution, there is room for an exchange of views, for a dialogue, to see what grievances can be redressed, which would calm things down in Balochistan, persuade more people that no, there is a way to get what we are demanding without picking up the gun. But I'm sorry to say, it doesn't wash with the military establishment or the security establishment. They don't accept it. They say India kara raha hai, end of story. So agar India kara raha hai, then the shadows of 71 are evoked all over again, and this time we are not going to let it happen. That seems to be the mindset. But I think it's a misreading of a very different situation from East Pakistan in 1971. That was a mistake in my view, and we suffered for that mistake, as everyone knows. We gave opportunity to India to separate the wing. But I'm sorry to say, we acted in such a way that nobody blamed India, they all blamed us. ठीक है ना? तो ये different situation है, different history है, different culture है, different लोग हैं, vast territory, very small population, fragmented, spread, nomadic, tribal to a very large extent still. It needs a different approach. Bengal was a politically very developed area. It was the center, one of the centers of the Pakistan movement, in case anyone's forgotten. Their disillusionment is another story. This is another story, and it needs to be looked at afresh, without blinkers inherited from the past, or mindsets inherited from the past, and with a view. Today, there is no proof that this is externally supported. Everybody says it's being done, but nobody has any proof. The world is changing in unpredictable ways. Thank you, Mr. Trump. The changes are unpredictable and may produce currents and ripples and eddies that we cannot even envisage today. And God forbid, if there is somebody interested and gets into this tangle in a big way, then you are looking at the possible breakup of the country. That's a serious enough possibility to cause everyone to sit up and rethink things, in my view.
In the 70s, when you were part of that resistance movement, well, उससे भी अगर हम लोग ओवरऑल बात करें अप टिल 2002, जो कवरेज थी या फिर जो बलूचिस्तान के अंदर जो हो रहा है वो इस तरीके से ना मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया पे ना इस तरीके से आ नहीं रहा था. Now what's different in the modern era is that everyone has access to the internet, anyone can upload anything and suddenly it's all over, like for the world to view. So अभी जो do you think के जो ये पीका के अंदर अमेंडमेंट आई है, फिर पंजाब में डेफेमेशन एक्ट ये आ रहा है, ये एक सहाफ़ी तो यही कह रहे हैं कि दिस इज़ अ वॉर अगेंस्ट फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच. डू यू थिंक के मे बी बलूचिस्तान को एंटिसिपेट करके ये भी एक अटेम्प्ट है टू रेन इन दिस जायंट बीस्ट दैट इज सोशल मीडिया एंड basically control the narrative of Balochistan?
That in the 70s, there was a complete news blackout about Balochistan. And we didn't have internet or social media in those days. We had the mainstream media. Complete news blackout. You cannot imagine how complete that was, how total that was. खबर ही नहीं आती थी, पता ही नहीं चलता क्या हो रहा है. In response, we did take out an underground bulletin or journal called Jabal, which used to report on the struggle. And it did find resonance amongst a lot of circles, inside Balochistan, of course, but outside Balochistan also. Because for the first time, people began to be informed कि हो क्या रहा है. It was all government propaganda until then. But compared to the 70s, this is a different world. You can, because you have the financial and coercive tools, more easily control the mainstream media, whether it's television or print. And you've done that. And I'm not blaming anybody. You know, when the knife is at your throat, choices are limited. But social media and the internet is another terrain. And for the state, it is actually a terra incognita. Pika, tweaks, attempts to control everything, the narrative in other words. How can it work? I'm not a techie, I'm a tech dinosaur. But I know young people can get around this in a twinkle. And what about those who are sitting outside? And you grab their family members here. How's that going to work? Is it going to support your cause and your narrative, or is it going to create new problems for you? You know the case I'm referring to. There are many. So this is a world in which suppression of information and views, I believe, is virtually impossible. They will emerge around the firewalls and around the attempts to stop it from some direction or the other. This is the beauty of the technology. It has a negative side, of course, also misinformation and all kinds of other wonderful things, but narratives cannot be totally controlled anymore. Information cannot be totally suppressed anymore. The news blackout of the 70s is now impossible. So whether you are sympathetic or antipathetic to the Baloch movement, you will be an informed person. You're going to get the information and then you draw your own conclusions. And so the state's narrative, which it wants should be the only narrative, it should have the monopoly of the narrative, virtually impossible today. So it is Don Quixote tilting at the windmills again.
अच्छा सर, एक यही जो 70s की बात कर रहे थे, तो एक तो मैं ये जानना चाह रहा हूँ कि 70s में जब आप वहाँ पर बलोच स्ट्रगल में इन्वॉल्व थे, तो उस वक्त जो लोग पंजाब में आम आदमी थे, पंजाब, केपी और सिंध, तो वो कितना शेयर करते थे कि भाई के जो बलूचिस्तान में हो रहा है? और वही मैं जानना चाह रहा हूँ कि अब क्या है कि अब आपके ख्याल से जो आम लोग हैं पंजाब में, केपी में, सिंध में, उनको कम से कम ये आइडिया होता जा रहा है कि बलूचिस्तान में जो लोग नाराज़ क्यों हैं और क्या वजह के लिए वो मज़ाहमत कर रहे हैं या एहतजाज कर रहे हैं, जैसे कि ये मिसिंग
कुछ खबर तो मिल रही है ना,
तो वो अवेयरनेस बढ़ी है आम लोगों में बाकी सूबों में?
70s की स्ट्रगल में हम तो पूरे पाकिस्तान में इनकलाब चाहते थे और हमने एलाइज भी बनाए, सिंध में बनाए, केपी में बनाए, पंजाब में बनाए. Most of them betrayed us when the going got tough, when the struggle started. Some groups, particularly Punjab, में रहे till the end. And then there was some opportunism also. माओइस्ट जो ग्रुप्स थे पंजाब में ख़ास तौर पे, पहले वो ख़िलाफ़ थे उस मूवमेंट के, बिकॉज दे वर enamored of entering into the PPP and utilizing that for their politics, not that it worked. So they were swallowing the propaganda of the Bhutto government कि ये सरदार्स हैं और reactionary elements हैं, और some even said bourgeois nationalism है. Same thing they said about East Pakistan, by the way. When they discovered that people like us were also involved, suddenly their tune changed. Knowing that these were Marxists, then they started supporting it. But it was too late. And it had no credibility. So yes, it was a serious problem. Gathering sympathy for the struggle throughout Pakistan. And I think it is that experience which widened the fissures between the provinces, particularly Punjab. And you can see today the consequences about 50 years later. On the one hand, आवाज़ नहीं उठ रही, फीलिंग्स चाहे हैं एक्सप्रेस नहीं हो रही, सिंध से नहीं हो रही, केपी से नहीं हो रही और अपना पंजाब से नहीं हो रही. That is reinforcing the sense of alienation of the Baloch and the struggle. And ever since they have plumbed for independence, which was not the case in the 70s, still about provincial autonomy, तो अब उन्होंने पंजाबियों को and security forces को, by the way, and the two are sometimes the same, target करना शुरू कर दिया है. I don't agree with this. I think it doesn't make sense to me. I think they are losing some of the moral high ground by doing this. But they are doing it, it's a desperate act. They are doing it because they want to prevent any more people flocking to Balochistan, taking jobs, taking away opportunities from them, leaving them still entwined in the poverty and deprivation in which they have been all these years.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've taken way too much of your time, but आपने वक्त दिया, यही बहुत हमारे लिए है.
I've taken a lot of your time.
No, not at all. This is what we do, and thank you so much. I think there's more light, more perspective on जो ये बलूचिस्तान issue है, and this is something जो इससे भी पहले अब्दुल मालिक बलोच साहब और सनाउल्लाह बलोच साहब इन्होंने यही शेड लाइट किया हुआ है कि डायलॉग इज़ नेसेसरी, बट एज़ यू हैव पॉइंटेड आउट, आई थिंक फ्रैक्चर्स अभी है ना बहुत ज़्यादा एग्जिस्ट कर रहे हैं अमंग द सीन वॉइसेस, एंड नेशनल सॉलिडारिटी फ्रंट इज़ राइट नाउ द नीड ऑफ द आवर, एंड दैट इज़ सो फार अभी जो नज़र आ रहा है द फर्स्ट स्टेप फॉरवर्ड इन दी बलूचिस्तान सॉल्यूशन.
With the help of your film, your interview, that the idea goes out and people respond. I don't have any vested interest in this. I'm not looking for any leadery or anything like that, you know. But I think एक ऐसी चीज़ है जो हम सब के दिलों से फूटनी चाहिए और एक दूसरे के दिलों को जोड़ने में मदद दे.
आपकी खबर, आपकी आवाज़. Voicepkdotnet.